Warning, this video contains critical levels of nostalgia. Metroid Prime is one of the most memorable and highest rated video games for the Nintendo GameCube. Developed by Retro Studios and Nintendo and released in 2002, Metroid Prime was actually the fifth in the Metroid series, with previous titles being released for NES, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy. I recently dusted off my GameCube and ran through the campaign for the first time in over a decade, and my heart was won all over again. So I want to cover this game through the lens of my first playthrough as a child and how, looking back as an adult with new eyes, I can appreciate how this game is both darker and more beautiful than I remember. To do this, I'll cover this game in two separate videos. Part 1, the story. There are several layers to the story of Metroid Prime, multiple plot lines happening simultaneously, and as you discover lore of people from the past, the present story becomes more clear as your future unfolds. Part 2, the design. I'll discuss several details, small and large, from the visual and audio design, as well as the general mechanics of the game and how that helps to create the environment to present the game's story, as well as some final remarks and how this game ties in directly to its sequel, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Again, for this series, I will be presenting it through the lens of someone picking up the game for the first time and having not played any of the previous titles or read any comics, as was my case when I picked up the game the first time when I was a 9-year-old kid. I am, however, presenting this through the expectation that the majority of people watching this have probably played through the game a few times. However, even if you haven't played Metroid Prime, stay tuned because Part 1 will be more of a reliving of the game as it happens and an analysis of the story. The format of Part 2 will be more along the lines of a review. So sit back, relax, let's start a new game, hard mode because reasons, and let's relive the dark and beautiful story of Metroid Prime. Unidentified distress beacon has been tracked to a derelict space vessel in orbit above Talon 4. Space. It's mostly a big, empty, lonely vacuum. An immeasurable, unfathomable, and infinitely discoverable frontier and plane of existence. Occasionally pebbled with treasure trove of life, clinging on to these tiny dots known as planets. Surrounded by an instantaneously lethal environment, braved by interstellar explorers, alien life forms, and power-hungry antagonistic races seeking to dominate galaxies. And bounty hunters. And that is where our story begins. A bounty hunter responding to a distress call. A bounty hunter known as Samus Aran. And yes, this is the moment when, as a 9-year-old kid, I said for the first time, "Oh my gosh, that's my favorite character from Super Smash Bros. I get to play as him?" Yes, Samus's gender was just one of 1,000 surprises in store for me in this game. Our adventure begins aboard this damaged frigate. This level serves as a tutorial for the controls, but also to paint the earliest strokes of the story. It does so by giving us vague details about our surroundings, the operators of this military or research vessel, but in large part just creates a general sense of confusion and curiosity. This is intentional. The story of Metroid Prime has several key players happening all at once, and our discoveries aboard the space pirate frigate named Orpheon will be a telltale sign of the nefarious and the malicious intent of this alien race. As we enter the first room, we discover several dead species, one of them a space pirate operator, a hideously mutated beastie of some kind, and some natural fauna that have apparently broken out of their cells. Likely from the planet we saw below, but possibly some kind of galactic animal smuggling or something. This is, after all, an intergalactic sci-fi adventure. But as we will discover, these are indeed the subjects of scientific experimentation. A quick visit to the map room and we are set to go on our Poseidon Adventure-esque traversing of what remains of this intact space vessel. What we can learn right away is that there will be some tight quarters in store for us as we explore. After our first real fight with some marginally capable yet badly injured space pirates, we get to see our first look at their scientific experiments in their stasis chambers. Whatever that is, it's not looking good. According to the scan, morphology is unknown. This specimen has been horribly mutated. There are no life readings. This is just the first glimpse into the tenacious disregard for life that the space pirates employ in their hunt for power and dominance. Our next scan introduces a mysterious element known as phazon. Nothing to clarify what that means or is, but it's apparently bad, probably. A few other scans around the room allude to some kind of infusion. Whatever they are infusing, it's causing these horrible mutations. And nothing says horribly mutated like the Queen of Mutation, our first boss of the game, the Parasite Queen. A scan will confirm genetic enhancement by unknown means. This is, in a general sense, a fairly easy fight as she doesn't do much damage, but it introduces us to a few mechanics such as strafing and tech such as force fields. As for story, it tells us that not everything the space pirates are up to are without vital signs. Whatever they're up to, some of their experiments are living. But you'll make swift work to change that, at least for the case in the Parasite Queen, and upon her defeat, the bloated space tick will drop down the shaft, causing a critical failure and triggering the only recorded dialogue of the game.
Evacuate immediately. Evacuate immediately.
This ship is going down fast, so it's time for you to make a hasty egress before you and what's left of those space pirates and their experiments go down in flames. But not before being introduced to another huge creature, Meta Ridley. You have absolutely no idea what that thing is. All you know is that you have a few minutes before this ship goes down, so this better not be another boss fight. Fortunately for you, it isn't. That comes later. Much later. Unfortunately, he isn't going to let you leave without a scratch, and it's a big one. You take a significant hit, which causes all of your combat tech to malfunction, with the exception of your power beam. This becomes much of the focus in the early part of the game, recovering tech, gadgets, and weapons to bring yourself up to combat readiness in order to defeat bosses, such as the aforementioned Meta Ridley, in the endgame. You and Meta Ridley make your escape. And by Samus tracking him through the atmosphere down to the surface of Talon 4, the story of how she will seal the fate of a whole planet and fulfill the prophecy of an ancient people can now effectively begin. Tracking on enemy target has been lost. Ground-based recon required. Begin landing sequence. As we get our first look at the planet up close, the diverse setting for the remainder of the story, much can be contemplated about the previous events. Who are the space pirates? What do they want? Why are they experimenting? What was that giant space dragon pterodactyl thing? Nothing can be explained at this point as we are dumped into another environment where we will only get more questions than answers, at least for now. We land on the gorgeous forested biome of Talon Overworld, and after taking a quick look around, scanning some native flora and fauna, blasting a few gamers here and there, taking a quick dip in the water, we jump straight into my personal favorite zone, Chozo Ruins. We ascend this massive elevator, again considering where we have been thus far and where we are going. And where we are going is an arid ruin covered in chiseled stones, ancient tech, and lots of sand. Sorry, Anakin. More than sand, this place is covered in lore, which gives us critical insight into who these ruins belong to. Now, as a kid, I gave very little attention to them, occasionally logging them and skimming them for interesting details. But that's because back then the Paper Mario series completely dominated the reading section of my brain, so I didn't retain much of the information. However, paying special attention to these lores, we actually gain critical details that help us unlock the story. The Chozo are an ancient and very intelligent people who hold their land and ancestors sacred. As you read their lores, you discover they are a people who care deeply about the land, are very religious or at least spiritually connected, and their desire is to see goodness triumph in their battle for survival. Moreover, they are once very technologically advanced people who left many of their technologies behind in an attempt to preserve themselves and their land. This is something that can serve as somewhat allegorious of today as we humans become more and more dependent and root-bound in the machines that run our lives. We can easily become numbed and controlled by the very technologies we invent, rather than harnessing the potential of technologies to augment who we are as a species. Do we adapt to our own creations, or do we submit to them? The Chozo as a race, for the most part, removed themselves from their technologies while maintaining ancient ones mostly centered around the preservation of what they view as sacred. As you advance through the rooms toward the marked object of interest on your map, you encounter the poison. Through Chozo lore, we discover that all the water in these halls were once pure, life-giving water, but were polluted by what they called the Great Poison. A quick dip in this water, unlike that on Talon Overworld, will confirm that it's damaging to the touch, even through her suit. That's nasty stuff. The entire ruins is polluted with poison. Even the air itself is a hazy, choking fume. Thankfully, not airborne enough to prevent exploring these chambers, but enough to drive the Chozo to the brink of extinction. As they describe in one of their lores, they are slipping from this world. You continue to gain pieces of this puzzle, but you are confronted with your first tech guardian, the Hive Mecca. A fairly simple enough fight, just shoot the ram war wasps and the critical spot on the Hive Mecca, but it's one that can go awry fairly quickly if one rams you off into the poison, as this is early on and you don't have very much health. Upon their defeat though, you gain access to the missile launcher and your quest for more gear continues. You continue in this fashion for a while, obtaining a number of items such as the charge beam through a puzzle door, the morph ball from the armor-plated beetle, and the morph ball bomb from the incinerator drone, all the while discovering more Chozo lore along the way. Two readings are especially telling. As you come across a poisoned fountain in one of the rooms, it's indicative that there's a poison source coming from elsewhere. Next to it, the Chozo lore called the Hatchling reads as follows. As we struggle with the great poison, something stirs at the edges of our vision. It is the hatchling, Samus. We feel her across the void as she hunts the corrupted. Will our fates again be one? As our pride shatters, will prophecy become real? When all strength wanes from the Chozo, will it be the hatchling who fulfills our legacy? True sight eludes us, for the poison gnaws at our vision, leaving seers blind and filled with despair. Truth's blessing may come too late. Additionally, the lore titled Meteor Strike reads, We have returned to Talon 4, born here against our will by the great cataclysm from the reaches of space. A meteor came, casting a dark shadow of debris over the land with the violence of its impact. Though we perceived this from beyond space and time, it is but a curiosity, a brief flare in the universe. But the meteor brought with it corruption. A great poison burst forth into the land. Ripped from the peaceful state and find ourselves wandering as shadows of the mortal forms we left behind, searching for why we are here. From these readings, we learn a few very important details. 1. The identity of the great poison. The Chozo labeled this as the corruptor of their planet, and they gave it a source, a meteor strike. As is motif in the Metroid series, the source of evil, or in this case poison, is an extraterrestrial source. We also learn that through the spirituality of the Chozo, they have prophesied a savior of their people, or at least their planet. As they are admittedly preserving these writings as their race is on the edge of extinction, they see visions of you coming to their rescue. So one must ask the question, where are they? Where are the Chozo? The first time playing this as a kid, of course I was curious to this question, in the way that a kid probably should be. I want to meet the other characters. As an adult looking back, I feel more of a driving force to make contact with this race that is in some way tightly connected to me spiritually. Again, assuming one has no prior knowledge of the connection of Samus and the Chozo through previous games or comics as I did through my first playthrough, you're simply wandering around these ruins trying to figure this all out. And Metroid Prime is written in a way to support both the gamer with fresh eyes and the longtime Metroid fan. After a few more upgrades and some more exploring, you finally come face to face with the source of the poison, the dreaded Flagra. This carnivorous flower does not have an appetite for small insects. It has an appetite for humanoids. For you. This massively mutated beastie is fed by 4 solar dishes which must be disabled in order to plant a morph ball bomb at the critical points. After a multi-phase battle that is the most challenging to this point by far, at long last you've ascended the heights of the Great Chozo Ruins and defeated the Great Poison. Scans indicate that this was the source of the toxic waters in the ruins, and after a refreshing dip in the water to confirm that the poison is all gone, all would suggest that you saved the day and the remaining Chozo that have survived the poison. But this is just the first chapter of this long story. As you backtrack through the ruins, it takes on a new face. Brightly colored water, rooms with beautiful sunbeams peering through the cracks, and places unlocked through the waters to discover. And with the virus suit acquired from defeating the giant Satan flower, you're free to explore the literal hellhole that is Magmoor Caverns. Yes, it is allowed to have a least favorite area, even in a game as amazing as Metroid Prime. Thankfully, after acquiring some helpful items, Magmoor Caverns essentially becomes, for the remainder of the game, a passageway between Chozo Ruins and my other favorite zone, the beloved Phendrana Drifts. Talk about a transition. Well, after some exploring and grabbing the boost ball from your first half-pipe area, you take your momentary leave from the Icy Summit, but you'll be back soon. And not before grabbing another very interesting Chozo lore titled Cipher. None know if our temple, the Cradle, will prove powerful enough to contain this evil forever. How can we Chozo hope for it to remain intact when that which it guards writhes in the darkness, growing always stronger? The fate of this world rests with gathering the artifacts we call Cipher, but even it is not all-powerful. It is strong, yes, an enchanted whole made of 12 links. Still, it is finite in its reach, and we who guard it are slowly succumbing. When our vigilance crumbles away into madness, the Cipher will be exposed, and the fate of Talon 4 will be beyond our influence. Things are starting to take shape, yet many things remain unseen. The Chozo took steps to try and contain the Great Poison through what they call the Cradle. To this point, you haven't seen it, know anything about the artifacts, and now it's becoming clear that the poison in the Chozo Ruins was indeed not the Great Poison, but an isolated caustic event brought on by whatever the Great Poison is. And to add more to the plot, upon stopping at the overlook in Phendrana shorelines, what but the ominous shadow of Meta Ridley flies over. Oh yeah, remember him? I guess your ground-based recon mission just acquired a new piece of intel. Well, after going all Tony Hawk on Talon 4's half-pipe, you gain access to one of the most important gadgets in the game, the Space Jump Boots, aka the Double Jump Boots. This will more than double the amount of land that you can explore now. But before you go off hopping across Talon 4, it's time to find out about this cradle, or this temple. Just a couple of rooms over, you come across a huge impact crater with a giant structure over it. While the gears start to crank about Chozo lore and meteor strikes, you come across your first pirate data? Oh yeah, remember them? So much has happened between when you escaped the space pirate frigate and now. Your first playthrough, you've probably picked up the controller, played a few hours, and turned it off several times by now. You've been gathering weapons, upgrades, exploring, reading lore, fighting baddies, slaying bosses, that if you were like me, you totally forgot the space pirates are even in this game. This is definitely intentional writing to make us forget this whole side of the story, to be reintroduced to it through this pirate data. And this is where some of the dots start to connect. The pirate data refers to a prime source of energy within the impact crater, and a containment field set in place by the Chozo structure atop the crater. Before we go any further, it should be said that if this is your first run through, you're probably starting to put some of these pieces together. But even in the condensed version, there's a lot of loose ends to tie up. So let's ask these questions again. Who are the Chozo and where are they? Who are the space pirates and why are they here? What is the Great Poison? What is the meteor strike? As we walk down the ramp to the temple area, we encounter our first Chozo artifact. Through the description, and if we are remembering our lore, it becomes clear that whatever is down there, the Chozo are trying to contain it. And if you gain access to all of these 12 artifacts, you gain access to whatever is down there. So after scanning clues on the remaining locations, we have a primary mission: gather the artifacts. And in order to do this, we need to constantly be on our secondary mission: gather more gear and weapons. And all the while, we are on a constant tertiary mission, continue to try and figure out what the heck is going on. After acquiring some minor updates and opting to find any artifacts available to you now, you head back for an extended stay in Phendrana Drifts, for what will be one of the highlights of your adventure. You discover another Chozo temple, and with the help of the statue of a Chozo elder, you are guided into the chamber holding your first beam weapon upgrade. After a long, arduous fight with Big Mama Shegoth, you acquire the Wave Beam, which will give you access to a huge number of rooms, and is closely tied to the powering electrical conduits, which you will need the thermal visor to unlock. But to do that, we will need to finally encounter who we have long been evading until this point: the Space Pirates. The reintroduction of the Space Pirates may come as a surprise to the first-time player, even after reading the pirate data at the cradle. The fact that it's taken this long to finally encounter them at full strength helps us digest one piece of the puzzle at a time. But with their reintroduction comes more lore, more info, and more questions. After powering on the hologram in the Space Pirate Observatory, you'll scan the pirate data collected on Talon 4, which includes one of the most ominous statements in the whole game. Talon 4, mass 5.1 trillion teratons. Profile: ecosystem studies indicate that Talon 4 was a biological paradise prior to the impact of an extraterrestrial object. What remains of this biosphere is slowly fading due to the exposure of phazon radiation. At current rate of decay, Talon 4 will be a barren Class 8 wasteland in approximately 25 years. What? So no matter what you do on this mission, Talon 4 is essentially doomed. The plants, the animals, the sentient species, the biomes, the whole planet has 25 years left before it's a completely barren rock, and that's in the cosmic blink of an eye. Your entire mission has written a check that no bounty hunter can cash. For me, this was a detail that took several playthroughs to sink in. More on this twist following the conclusion of the story. This exposes even more behind the motives of the space pirates. They are aware of the alarmingly short lifespan left on the planet, and rather than taking any possible means of preservation, even for selfish reasons, they are instead attempting to harness this very essence, and every bit of it. And remember way back to that scan on the space pirate frigate about phazon? According to this log, the meteor that the Chozo record about in their lore, the pirates refer to as the source of phazon radiation on Talon 4. As you continue to fight through their labs and find more data, the pieces come together in a sinister fashion. This is where the reading begins and where the mysteries end. In log 105877, we learn that they have begun mining operations on the phazon near the impact crater, but some of the miners are succumbing to, quote, phazon-induced madness, described as a lack of equilibrium, erratic breathing, muscle spasms, and even hallucinations. And log 103448 reads as follows: we have codified the newfound energy source as phazon, a Victor-indexed mutagen of which we have very little reliable data. Indications point to a meteor of unknown origin impacting approximately 20 years ago, expelling phazon into the environment. This material appears to possess lifelike characteristics, mutating organic life forms strong enough to withstand its poison. These mutations appear promising, with abrupt evolutionary leaps appearing in single-generation reproduction. Plans to establish a full science team on Talon 4 are being finalized. And in log 105158, we learned that they are exposing creatures to phazon with successful attempts in maturing creatures, although with high mortality rates and psychological aggression. So, if you're up on your reading, it all comes together. The great poison is phazon. The source is the meteor. And the pirates want to harness phazon's ability to mutate creatures for the potential explained in hands down the most chilling reading in the whole game. This is found in the laboratory directly adjacent to these previous pirate logs. What would Metroid Prime be without Metroids? We encounter our first Metroid in the containment chamber inside this lab. Next to it, there's a data console which tells us that they are exposing this Metroid to variable amounts of phazon for scientific tests. The space pirates are not happy about you meddling in their affairs and put up a fight, but they're no match for Samus. You quickly dispatch of the Metroid and the pirates, and then you're off for more reading. Log 114207 reads as follows. Metroid dissection continues to produce more questions than answers. Go figure. Our research teams have isolated the energy conduits that run from the invasive twin mandibles to the energy core in the creature's quadripartite nucleus, but the manner in which the Metroid actually extracts the life from its prey remains an utter mystery. The victim does not lose any blood or any other vital fluids, and yet the Metroid extracts energy. Identifying this energy is our central problem. It takes no physical form, and yet without it the victim dies. We will continue to research this matter as the isolation of this life-giving essence could be the key to our ascendance. The stage is now set to read the all-revealing log, 15506, aka Metroid Forces. Studies of Metroid biology continue, though with limited progress. It seems likely that we will be much more successful using Metroids for our means rather than trying to reproduce their powers. If they could be adequately tamed, we would have no need for proper understanding of their metabolism. A small force of disciplined Metroids could wipe out entire armies, and once we find a way to shield them from cold containment weapons, they will be invincible. Furthermore, if we could find a way to harvest the energy they consumed, we would have a near limitless source of power at our disposal. The pirates need the phazon to mutate the Metroids to bolster their army, and if they can harvest the energy, which is literally the life force of their victims, they would have a limitless source of power. That's right, they'd have an invincible army powered by the souls of their victims. This is the underpin reason why we have space pirates in Metroid Prime. They are dead set on conquest with no regard for life whatsoever, to the point of harvesting the very life force of the victims to fuel their war machine. And it is at this point that I remember that this whole journey starts with you responding to their distress call aboard their ship due to a breakout of phazon-infused monsters that they created. So, your mission just got a lot bigger. Find the artifacts, stop the pirates, remove the phazon, save the planet, if that's even possible at this point, and to do that you still need to get more gear and weapons. And who is the guardian of the spider ball, one of the most iconic gadgets in the game? None other than the great and mighty Thardis. Ladies and gentlemen, this is to this day still the most memorable boss fight for me from any game in my childhood, other than maybe the final Bowser on Mario 64. He's probably so memorable because it took so long for me to actually beat him. Thardis, aka Project Titan, is the result of the pirates experimenting on creating sentient beings out of inanimate objects using phazon. The results? A massive quarantined rock monster that does not take kindly to you waking him up from his slumber. Even now this fight is a significant challenge. Recording for this video on hard mode, I managed to beat him on my second attempt, being only one hit away from death. You can actually click the link in the corner if you want to see the whole boss fight. Defeating Thardis marks the approximate halfway point in the game. And now that you are armed with knowledge from the Space Pirate Labs and the new prize of the Spider Ball, you are rolling on to the second half of the game in style. From here on out, things get downright spooky. Allure on the way to the Hall of the Elders in Chozo Ruins describes, "The cries of this dying world pulls us from our dreaming state, and now we Chozo walk as ghosts while the great poison sinks into the trees, devouring all life." This may sound like a metaphor, and maybe you were hoping that it was, but this lore comes to fruition when entering the hall and out of the statue of the Chozo Elder, ghosts rise up and initiate combat. Dipping in and out of the physical realm, the fight against these Chozo ghosts aren't actually that difficult. The difficult part is the act of putting down the spiritual form of the people you came here to save. However, your actions seem to be rewarded by the Chozo, as the statue of the Elder receives you with open arms, quite literally, and opens up a new path for you to continue on your quest. With the help of the Chozo Elder, in the same way you did in Phendrana, you gain access to acquire the Ice Beam, opening a path back to Talon Overworld, and upon returning to your ship, something catches your eye. The same type of shipping container that was on the Space Pirate frigate, and it's oozing Phazon. But wait a minute, if that's the same kind of shipping crate that was on the Orpheon, where did this come from? Rewind. There it is! There's the frigate! That's where the story all started. It appears the pirates didn't make it too far from the Phazon source. As much as it is tempting to explore the downed frigate and listen to the best song in the game, which is saying a lot, you need one more vital piece of gear first, the gravity suit. After a quick trip to Phendrana Drifts and a cold dip in the freezing creek, you do some sick tricks and pick up the gravity suit, allowing you to jump swiftly through the water. So now that you're a lean, mean swimming machine, you hightail it back to the Orpheon's crash site for what will be a hauntingly beautiful passage to a very deadly destination. And doesn't this look familiar? The last time you were sprinting through these ventilation pipes, you had an ominous countdown above your head and a giant fireball blowing up your tailpipe from an explosion that you created after a chain reaction happened after killing the Parasite Queen. Good times. Although now it's submerged in water, and you get to listen to this. One of the most memorable sequences in the whole game, in part thanks to the soundtrack. Minus the floating bodies and the wreckage, it's quite the tranquil place. But it leads to a place that is anything but Phazon Mines. From here on out, the enemies are tougher and more determined to stop you as you infiltrate their operation headquarters on Talon 4. Here you encounter space pirates augmented by Phazon mutations and specially recruited by the pirate commanders. They reverse-engineered your weapon tech, making enemies only vulnerable to certain weapons and modified weapons of their own. And you face a new breed of enemy, the Elite Pirate. Forged in stasis chambers and infused with Phazon radiation, they are specially bred to dispatch you. What they refer to as Project Helix in their pirate data is originally met with disastrous results, quoting, "None of what we termed elite pirates lived to maturity. The few that survived their infanthood suffered severe psychotic breakdowns as juveniles, killing anything within their zone of perception. The space pirates have shown no regard for life whatsoever, but to subject their own embryos to this level of heinous experimentation shows the measure of their resolve." In a further lore, 114404, referring to ridding all of Talon 4 of any traces of the Chozo, they write this: "The dead should serve the living, not hinder them." The same is true referring to the evil that they subject their own kind to. But after more research, they found a way to mitigate this variable in Project Helix, and the first batches of elite pirates are ready for field testing, just in time for you. But before you get your first crack at the new monstrous soldier, one piece of interesting pirate data can easily be overlooked but should not be missed. Pirate data 111569 reads, "Test subject Zulu Delta, hereafter referred to as Metroid Prime, was recently discovered in a cavern by mining crews. It quickly dispatched the miners, but was eventually contained by security units and drones. Once contained, we were able to begin studies upon Metroid Prime. The results have been astonishing. It is genetically similar to a Metroid, albeit on a high evolved level. It displays a limitless capacity for Phazon infusion and shows no Phazon-based degeneration whatsoever. It continues to grow in size, and while it has manifested some psychotic behavior, the cold field we use to pacify remain effective. Authorization for advanced studies on Metroid Prime have been approved." This is the first actual mention of Metroid Prime in the game, at least by name. Referred to by the Chozo in their lore as the Worm, its identity thus far could easily have been confused with Flagra or even as a metaphor for the meteor which brought the Great Poison. Again, details often unfold before you can discern its meaning. At the moment, more pressing needs are at hand, like dispatching that giant radioactive super pirate. But don't worry, because there's more where that came from. If the elite pirate wasn't enough, I give you the Omega Pirate. This Phazon-infused giant is the pinnacle of the Space Pirates infantry. As for their science teams, this would prove even more of a success than Project Titan, in that Thardus would eventually be abandoned to the quarantine chamber, but the Omega Pirate would actually see combat in the field, and you are its first test subject for its military strength. Using your recently acquired plasma beam and X-ray visor, you chip away at the Omega Pirate's reinforced shields, and blast a series of damaging hits to its core, all while reinforcements of powerful space pirate soldiers are called to assist. After delivering a final blow, the Omega Pirate tumbles forward, smashing you and its massive corpse to the ground. In an accidental and inadvertent corruption of Phazon to her power suit, Samus gains the Phazon suit, allowing her to maneuver through Blue Phazon. Thank you, Project Helix. So now that you are armed to the teeth and can access every room in the game, it's finally time to gather all the artifacts and venture to the cradle. After dispatching some more Chozo ghosts, blasting through invisible walls, and returning to past battlegrounds to find artifacts hidden away in old familiar places, it's finally off to your final showdown between you and Metroid Prime. But if you remember to hit a hallway in the Chozo Ruins locked away until now, you'll read one lore that cements the weight of your mission. The final lore of the Chozo, titled Newborn. The power of our temple has been enough to halt the spread of the poison on Talon 4, but that which remains thrives and grows, ever concentrated, gnawing on itself in the dark passages beneath the planet's surface. Whether it can ever be truly destroyed is not for our eyes to see, but there is something else. We Chozo are drifting, tumbling through space and time as the great poison eats away at our sanity. We wake in dreams. As the veil of lunacy descends, as past and future blend and shuffle, one image appears and flickers through the landscape, wraith-like. It is the hatchling, the newborn, walking the path of corruption, a lone figure shining in the toxic shadows. She comes dressed for war, and her wrath is terrible. Do our eyes look backwards, seeing the hatchling as she once was, or does she approach even now, arriving in our race's last hour, a savior clothed in machines crafted long ago by the Chozo hands? Poisonous clouds drift across our vision. The time has finally come for the final battle, but out of the clouds comes a familiar face, a showstopper, Meta Ridley. Many times you two have faced each other, and now you will finally face off. But in one fell swoop, he shatters the top of the temple and destroys the portal that you spent the entire game trying to open. With the stage set, the battle begins. Scans on Ridley indicates that he is genetically enhanced and evolved through pirate tech. A formidable foe that breathes plasma beams, shoots rockets, melees with brute force, and swings his tail like a giant mace. In the final stages of the fight, you burn away his wings, effectively grounding him on the face of the cradle, but that does not stop the fight. He charges at you headlong and makes every attempt to stop you, but with one final hit, the Chozo Temple comes alive and delivers a crushing blow to Meta Ridley, sending him into the hole for which the source of Phazon came. But that was just the warm-up battle. The true enemy, the worm, the Metroid Prime, still waits for you below. But how do you get down there? For the first time in your journey, Friendly spirits of the Chozo ascend from inside the temple, resurrecting the artifacts and granting you, the newborn, the hatchling, Samus, the fulfillment of the prophecy, access to the depths of the crater. In ways that the statues of the elders have multiple times before, the living spirits of the dead Chozo act as your gatekeeper. You descend into the impact crater, a subterranean environment heavily mutated and twisted by a new element, red phazon. A significantly more deadly form oozing directly from its source. Even your phazon suit does close to nothing against this substance, as a mere touch to it rapidly tears through your health. After evading or fighting a heavily mutated breed of fission Metroids, and precariously maneuvering the Tunnel of Death, you enter the chambers of Metroid Prime. It is time. This whole journey has prepared you for this moment. An ominous face hangs from the ceiling. As you approach the beast, it stirs, unraveling itself, showing you its true form. This is it. The aberration known as Metroid Prime is the source of phazon, making it immensely powerful. A genetic flaw makes it susceptible to certain weapons for brief periods. Only its head is truly vulnerable. Other attacks are a nuisance. Offensively, Metroid Prime has a number of natural and mechanical weapons at its disposal. These include Ultra Frigid Beam, multi-missiles, snare beams, and particle wave projectors. Its massive strength and barbed carapace make it lethal in melee combat. Recommend maximum firepower when engaging this enemy. The scan indicates that Metroid Prime is the source of phazon, aka the Great Poison on Talon 4. The meteor is the source of the Great Poison. That means Metroid Prime is the meteor. Bringing it back to Pirate Data 111569, the pirates were doing testing on Metroid Prime in the mines and even claimed to contain the beast. All the while the Chozo forged and placed the cradle above the impact crater in order to prevent the spread of the Great Poison, and the pirates were doing research on these artifacts in order to gain access to this phazon. In one stroke of the pen, everything becomes clear. Now it's time to kick some Prime butt. The fight descends multiple levels of the crater, each progressing in difficulty as the rooms get smaller and smaller, and Prime gets more and more aggressive and more desperate with every bit of health that's lost. Echoing the Chozo lore, our last hope lies in the cradle, the temple we hope might contain this abomination. It is almost complete, hovering over the impact site, the dark heart of this spreading evil. If we can finish before the last of our kind drifts into madness or death, there is a chance for this world. If we fail, we are doomed with it. After an epic and long fight, waging back and forth, the battle-hardened Samus delivers a final blow, and the husk of Metroid Prime falls into another sub-level. Samus investigates. Upon entry to the final sub-level, the core of Metroid Prime is revealed, impenetrable to every weapon fire. That is, every conventional weapon. Thanks to the phazon suit, another inadvertent result appears: Hyper Mode. Samus envelops pools of blue phazon on the ground and fires a corruption of beam energy and phazon back at the core of Metroid Prime. Using the very radioactive energy which corrupted and mutated the flora, fauna, land, water, mind, and spirit of everything on Talon 4, Samus hurls a decisive blow to Metroid Prime, revealing the essence. In a final outstretched attempt, Metroid Prime reaches out and grabs Samus, causing a struggle. Pulling her phazon suit from her and absorbing it, it causes a chain reaction which reveals an imminent collapse of the crater. Once again, Samus is on the run. And it was at this moment, the first time as a kid, I realized the Chozo are all gone. But we escape with our lives after saving the day, right? Well, let's dissect this in a way that a space pirate might dissect a Metroid. So, what is it exactly that you accomplished? Let's look at our general mission objectives in order of importance as they unfold. First, defeat the worm. Well, when killing Metroid Prime with 100% completion, you're given a cutscene of an ominous hand reaching out of the pool of phazon, and a dashing eye emerging, frantically scanning its surroundings. This is none other than the birth of Dark Samus, a returning villain in the sequel of Metroid Prime. So defeat the boss? Failure. Save the Chozo. Although it can't be blamed on your arrival date, you simply were too late to save any of the Chozo. Despite restoring their ruins to a poison-free existence and acquiring the weapons and artifacts that they left for you, you destroyed their temple and failed to actually save anyone. So in the grand scheme of things, failure. So everything you're fighting for, to fulfill the prophecy and save the Chozo, is in vain because they're already all dead. Or, if we're being optimistic, some escaped the planet before being corrupted. And if in some higher way, by liberating their sacred land from the great poison, did indeed save what was left of their people, the planet is doomed anyway. The space pirates know this, and that's why their base is mobile, a flash in the pan. They mutate the life of Talon 4 into bioweapons, they mine as much phazon as they can, and they leave the planet. So in the end of this beautiful adventure, everyone's dead, their remains are destroyed, the planet is doomed, the baddies aren't defeated, and the final boss survives. Woof! That's it? Well, that would be it, if we didn't have sequels to clarify our ending. Spoiler alert, incoming. First, let's look at the doomed planet, Talon 4. This is perhaps the only true success on your mission. Recall that little detail on the Space Pirate Observatory in Phendrana Drifts where you discover the entire planet will be, quote, a Class 8 barren wasteland in a quarter of a century. This is because the atmosphere is deteriorating due to the presence of phazon, spread by the extraterrestrial source which we now know was Metroid Prime. Well, you'd actually have to play the sequel Metroid Prime 3 Corruption to get your answer as to the fate of the planet. An in-game logbook entry on Talon 4 indicates a visible scar from the extraterrestrial body, but, quote, the planet appears to have recovered from any negative effects of the object's impact. It is assumed that the implosion of Metroid Prime disintegrated the remaining blue and red Phazon on the planet, and what little remained forged with Samus's suit, creating Dark Samus. So in the rebirth of a villain, you prevent the death of a whole planet. So, save the planet? Success! Next, defeat the space pirates. Well, with the Phazon removed and a crashed frigate into the planet, and now no longer means of harvesting fuel or research on Talon 4, the space pirates just move on for you to fight periodically in your future adventures. And if you're unfamiliar with the Metroid series, when you first encounter Meta Ridley on the frigate Orpheon, this actually is not the first meeting between Samus and the space pirate dragon, albeit now converted into a cybernetic form of the previous Ridley. And despite the cinematic defeat over the cradle, this will not be the last time we see Ridley in the future releases. So for defeating the space pirates, I'll leave the score up to you on this one. As for the activities on Talon 4, the battle is won, but as for the galaxy, the war continues. So in conclusion of the story, Metroid Prime in a vacuum is a surprisingly dark and incredibly beautiful game. In retrospect, with knowledge gained through later sequels, we actually gain more depth as to the actions of Samus on Talon 4, both her failures and her victories, but mostly her victories. At this time, if I left anything out or got something wrong, or you just have a different opinion about anything thus far, please write a comment below. With the video this long covering lore that expands the entire game and its sequels, I'm likely to leave something out or be just completely off on something. If you don't own a copy of Metroid Prime, I highly suggest you pick it up, as it exists in several forms now that is not just on the GameCube, but the Wii as well. Thank you for watching, I'm Tween Swag, and I will see you in part 2 of the series.